In terms of the agenda for the session, oops, go. We'll get to know OET listening, review the different contexts or situations used in the listening subtest with practice questions, and explore the different listening skills and ways to improve them ahead of test day. At the end, we'll have time for questions. So let's start with the basics of OET listening. There are 3 parts to OET listening, and it takes around 40 minutes. In part A, you hear 2 separate consultations between a healthcare professional and a patient. Each audio has 12 questions, so 24 in total. In part B, you hear 6 short monologues or dialogues, similar to what you would hear in the workplace. For instance, handovers, safety briefings, discussions about medication or surgery. There's 1 question per audio. And in part C, you hear 2 long presentations, around 4 to 5 minutes each. These are similar to a podcast or something you would hear at a conference or seminar as part of professional development. And each of these audios has 6 questions each. So let's look more closely at the 3 listening contexts you deal with in OET listening. These are consultations, workplace communication, and professional development. You're probably familiar with these contexts, so you know what kinds of things to expect when you listen to them. I want you to think about the context as you prepare. Can you tell me which part of the test relates to these contexts? Starting with part A, in which you hear 2 consultations between a healthcare professional and a patient, your task is to complete the healthcare professional's notes with information about the consultation. What's the best way to do that, do you think? Essentially, you are listening for a specific information you need to fill in the gaps in the case notes. During the reading time, try anticipating the type of information you're listening for from the case notes. The headings and completed notes will help you follow the conversation. Use the completed notes to recognize when information will be given. Remember, the words in the audio won't be exactly the same as those written in the notes because what you are looking at are healthcare professional notes, and the patient will speak in more lay language, more kind of non-technical language. And write the exact words from the audio. Don't change anything. Now let's look at a real part A question. First, we have the context statement here. It says, you hear a rheumatologist talking to a patient called Emil Agen. For questions 1 to 12, complete the notes with a word or short phrase that you hear. You have 30 seconds to look at the notes. Okay, so let's go ahead and write the answer. But before we do that, let's use the tips we just saw. So first of all, what clues can we see in the text surrounding the blanks or the gaps in the conversation? First of all, we see onset of condition. This phrase, connected to, linked to, or due to, right? Those are all kind of synonyms for attributed to. So I can anticipate the patient will likely describe something about the cause of the condition in the first blank. What is it caused by? What is it linked to? Closer to the blank, the word work stands out, telling me that I'll probably be listening for a job title, right? A job title. The article gives me one more clue. It probably starts with a consonant, right? B, C, D, F, because we have the letter A, not and, we have the article A, meaning that we're probably listening for a consonant. Now for question 2, what do we see here? It said blank and weightlifting at gym to strengthen back. So maybe something that you're going to be listening for something that the person would do at the gym, right? That's what we're listening for here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play the audio for you. And then I'd like you to try to answer the questions in the chat. Let me make sure I'm sharing my sound. Here we go. Let me go ahead and play the audio.
So, Emil, I understand you've been having problems with your back. I've got your notes here, but it would be good to hear your perspective. Could you run through how this started, what treatment you've had, and anything else you think I should be aware of?
Sure. I've been getting back pain for around 2 years. It all started when I got a job as a bus driver. I've always done a lot of driving, but it had never been my main occupation before. Anyway, after about 4 months, I realized I was starting to get a few niggling pains in my lower spine, nothing too serious, but enough to make me feel a bit uncomfortable at the end of a day's work.
Okay.
So I started going to the gym because I've always been pretty fit. I'd do stretching sessions along with lots of weightlifting because I wanted to strengthen my back. I mean, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Sure.
Okay, so we have number one and number two. Um, I want you to go ahead and take a few seconds to write in the chat. What do you think the answer to this could be? We have number one and number two. Attributed to work as, and then did blank. So take about maybe 30 seconds to try to answer this, okay? All right, so let's see. I had some people write some answers. Um, Bus driver, stretching. Let's go ahead and look over our answers. Number one was bus driver. Very good. Number two was stretching, or you could say stretching sessions. Either of those is okay. Stretching, stretching sessions. And here we have the transcript, okay? So notice that the only accepted answers came directly from the audio. You cannot change a word or add any words. These are the only possible answers for this question. Now, let's do questions 3 and 4. First, we're going to read the surrounding text, okay? So go ahead and read the text around 3 and 4 and try to think about what you'll be listening for, okay? What you'll be listening for. And then I'll go ahead and play the audio for you in a few seconds. So I'll give you maybe 10 more seconds to just read through that and think about what you might be listening for. All right. So let me go ahead and play this for you.
So, Emil, I understand you've been having problems with your back. I've got your notes here, but it would be good to hear your perspective. Could you run through how this started, what treatment you've had, and anything else you think I should be aware of?
Sure. I've been getting back pain for around 2 years. It all started when I got a job as a bus driver. I've always done a lot of driving, but it had never been my main occupation before. Anyway, after about 4 months, I realized I was starting to get a few niggling pains in my lower spine, nothing too serious, but enough to make me feel a bit uncomfortable at the end of a day's work.
Okay.
So I started going to the gym because I've always been pretty fit. I'd do stretching sessions along with lots of weightlifting because I wanted to strengthen my back. I mean, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Sure.
Anyway, things continued to get gradually worse until it got to the point where as soon as I sat down anywhere, I'd feel the pain come on.
Right.
It's mainly just above the glute and always on that left side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how best to describe it really, but my back just doesn't feel right. I guess you'd say there's some kind of stiffness there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, take a few seconds to write your answers for just number 3 and 4. What do we think here? All right, let's go through our answers. We have glute and stiffness. Glute and stiffness are our answers here. So again, I'm just going to close off this first section with those same tips that we just saw. Anticipate the type of information, use the completed notes to recognize what information will be given. Remember that what you hear isn't exactly what will be in the case notes, and write the exact words spoken in the audio to answer. So in terms of when it comes to listening part A, listening to consultations, the important skills you need are following a patient-centered consultation, use of non-technical language and idiomatic language, listening for detail, and of course, spelling is very important in listening part A, okay? In order to practice, you can use this YouTube series, GPs Behind Closed Doors. Another YouTube series is called Consultations for Health. Also, you can, of course, use our practice tests and accent familiarization. So as you might have noticed, this person speaking had a, I believe it was a British accent for this one, but you can find different types of accents with OET, right? Maybe you'll find one that's OET, US accents, Canadian accents, UK accents, Australian accents. So definitely being familiar with different accents is important. All right, so let's move on to part B. As we mentioned before, you are already familiar with the type of conversations that happen in the workplace. Even if they are in your own language, the content will be similar to you. You can use this knowledge to help you listen. Tell me in the chat what type of things you might expect to hear in the conversations. I'm actually going to go ahead and just share the answers for you. We're going to skip you guys don't need to write it in the chat. You can definitely think about it though, okay, as I'm sharing this, what you might expect to hear in these different types of situations. So we have a handover. Maybe we hear things, information or opinion about patient care. In a safety briefing, you might hear potential safety concerns in a particular area. In staff briefings, you might hear information about admissions, discharges, patient updates, plans. In feedback sessions, you might hear what went well and areas for improvement. And in adverse incident reporting, you might hear areas of concern and actions to avoid further incidents. Okay, so these are all things that you might hear in these different types of situations. So in listening part A, you are listening for specific bits of information from a conversation. In listening part B, you will need to listen a bit differently. Here, you're not listening for specific bits. Instead, one of the listening skills you are applying in listening B is to listen to the overall message of the conversation. Then use the reading time. Let's see, listen for the overall message of the conversation. Therefore, using the reading time is key. Our advice is not to go to the options first. Instead, spend time reading the context sentence and thinking about what you might hear. Then read the question to understand what you should listen for. Then finally, read the options. But when you do so, identify the points of difference that separate one option from the other. So first get a general idea, then read the questions to understand what to listen for, then read the answer options and identify the main points of difference between them. All right, let's try. Here is the context sentence. You hear a community pharmacist talking to a patient. Okay, so just think about for a second what you might hear in this type of conversation. Okay. Then it says, well, one thing you might hear is the patient has probably visited their local pharmacy for advice. That's one thing that you might hear in this type of consultation, okay? So what does the question here ask us to listen for? The patient agrees to. So we're listening for what does the patient agree to do? What does the patient agree to do? Okay. So then we have the three answer options. And I want you to notice the repeated words in these three answer options. So changing the type of medication, right? We have what are the main points of difference between these, right? They all mention medication, but what are the differences? A says to change the type he takes. B, avoid taking the medication with meals. And C, take the medication at a different time. So those are the kind of the three answer options here. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and play the audio for you, and I would like you to choose the best answer, A, B, or C.
Hi, what can I do for you?
I was after something for this pain I'm getting in my chest. It comes on after dinner, and I get like an acidic taste at the back of my throat too. It's been going on about a week. I mean, I sometimes eat late night takeaways, curries and stuff, and that can give me indigestion, but never anything like this.
I see. Are you taking any medication?
Yeah, I've just started taking doxycycline for my acne. I have that with my evening meal.
Okay. What you're describing sounds like heartburn. Doxycycline can sometimes cause that if you lie down right after taking it. So I'd recommend having it with breakfast instead. Spicy foods can also worsen heartburn, so I'd keep off those for the time being.
Sure. Now you mention it, the doctor did say to avoid lying down after taking my medicine. I'd forgotten that.
All right, so go ahead and write in the chat what you think the answer is, A, B, or C for this one, A, B, or C. The patient agrees to, what is this patient agreeing to do? All right, so as you're thinking of your answers, trying to write those down, I'm gonna go ahead and show you the transcript. And highlighting where the answer is here. It says, I'd recommend having it with breakfast instead. It's kind of where the answer would be. So if we're looking at that, what does the patient agree to do? The answer would be letter C, take his medication at a different time. That's what the patient is agreeing to do, okay? All right, now we have another practice question. Here's our context. You hear a hospital nurse talking to a patient who is being discharged following hip replacement surgery. Okay. So that is what that is the context here. And then we have how does the patient feel about the modifications made to his home? Okay. That is our question. And then we have our answer options, okay? A, B, and C. And I want you to look at the difference between them. Unconvinced that they're actually necessary. Surprised that they aren't intended for long-term care. And concerned that he hasn't been shown how to use them. Okay, very good. All right, so that is our three answer options here. So now let's go ahead and listen, and I would like you to choose what you think the best answer is, A, B, or C.
So let's just go over what you've discussed with the different therapists today, just to be sure we've covered everything and you're completely happy with the arrangements.
Right, well, the physiotherapist's given me some exercises, and I know that's not something I can afford to skip. Then the occupational therapist has arranged for some grab rails and things like that to be fitted at home, and I think somebody's already been round to see to that.
They have.
Anyway, my son's been shown where they are and what they're for, so that shouldn't be a problem. But then she also said it was actually up to me how long I used them for, that I need to see how I get on. I was a bit taken aback by that, to be honest, but I do get the point that ideally I need to learn to manage without them, so I'll do my best.
Great.
All right, take a few seconds to write your answer. Okay, very good. I see some people writing their ideas. Okay, someone suggesting letter C. Okay. So if we look at this, talking to a patient who's being discharged following hip replacement surgery, how does the patient feel about the modifications? The answer here would actually be letter B. He's surprised that they aren't for long-term use. He thought it was just something that had to be done very temporarily, and he was surprised to find that it was for long-term use, something that he should keep doing, okay? All right. So when it comes to listening part B, the skills we need are awareness of workplace communication, so team briefings, handovers of a patient, healthcare professional patient dialogues. We have to be able to identify detail, opinion, and purpose, okay? In terms of ways to practice, we have we have a YouTube series, AHRQ Patient Safety, which focuses in the US. You can search that on YouTube. And then also reality TV shows that are maybe if there's something that has a medical focus or something like that, you can definitely consider that and look them up in your home country or in other countries. Practice test transcripts could also be helpful for this. All right, so moving on to listening part C. We can use a similar approach in part C as well. What can you expect to hear when reading these context sentences? Okay, so we have two context sentences. You hear an interview with a geriatrician called Mr. Brian Munro. who specializes in pain management for people with dementia. So what might we hear here? We might hear something about the care of elderly people with dementia, right? And then number 2, you hear a diabetes specialist nurse called Tim Cox giving a presentation about some research he's done on teenagers with type 1 diabetes. What might we be listening to? Something about research for teenagers with type 1 diabetes, okay? Just to give you an idea, to give your brain an idea to what it might be listening for, right? What are you listening for when you're hearing these context statements? All right, so here's a context statement for our extract. You hear a presentation by Dr. Nihal Premadasa, who is talking about a weight management program for patients with acquired brain injury. Okay, it's about weight management, as you can see, but not just any weight management. It's for those with acquired brain injury. So what does this question tell us to listen for? Right, you're listening for what parts of recovery do not get enough attention. What aspect of recovery does not get enough attention? Okay. Listen for cues in the audio. The speaker will mention recovery or a synonym of recovery. Another thing I want you to think about is in the question, it says gets too little attention. What are some other ways that you can say gets too little attention, right? You might use something like ignored, overlooked, neglected, something that doesn't get discussed or studied enough. Those are different ways for you to say gets too little attention, all right? So next we're looking at the answer options here. What are the main points of difference between these answer options? The self-image is affected, it affects relationships with others, and affects the ability to perform everyday tasks, okay? Now, one thing to note here is that you should be listening for the meaning, not for the specific vocabulary word you see in the answer options, but what is the meaning? Something that conveys that meaning, even if it's not written in the same way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and listen here, and then I'm going to go ahead and play it. You can listen and then write what you think the answer is.
Hi, my name's Nihal Premadasa. I lead a multidisciplinary team at a residential rehabilitation centre for adult patients with acquired brain injury. Today, I'd like to tell you about a 12-week weight management programme we developed for our patients. Firstly, some background about our centre and the programme itself. A brain injury can be devastating for the patient, who often experiences a loss of identity. The impact of that can be worsened by the fact that there's a general lack of public understanding about the nature and effects of brain injuries. Patients often face a long struggle to regain physical, cognitive, and social skills, and that's where a residential centre like ours comes in. Our multidisciplinary team aims to enhance patient recovery, and we identified that an often overlooked area of that recovery was how a person feels about themselves as they adapt to a new lifestyle with the physical, emotional, and cognitive scarring caused by their injury. And weight change can play a part in that.
All right, so I'm now going to show the transcript here. Okay, and I have that here. The first part, and the second part here. And in the second part, I want to highlight a specific section that might be helpful. So with that in mind, what do we think the answer would be to this question? What aspects of recovery from a brain injury does Nihal feel gets too little attention? What do we think the answer is? A, B, or C? Go ahead and write that in the chat. What do you think the answer is? The answer is letter A, the extent to which the patient's self-image is affected. Very good. Okay, so in order to improve your listening, the main skills we need are to follow an extended presentation or interview on healthcare topics. And we have to be able to identify the gist, the attitude, and the opinion. Okay. And in order to practice this, we can use podcasts, we can use TED Talks, and the transcripts from the listening sample test on our website. Now, before we continue, you can actually download this mini OET listening test to complete the tasks from today's workshop. So if you'd like to listen through those again and answer some of the questions and practice again, feel free to take a picture of this and download it from our website, the mini OET listening test. Okay, so go ahead and take a picture of that. I should be able to write the link in the chat too, actually. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so here are some kind of final summary points here for listening. You should be practice listening every day with a practice test or for pleasure, and try listening without subtitles if you can, okay? Next thing, you should try to listen for 40 minutes at a time, at least twice a week, to build up your stamina, okay? But not only doing practice tests, you should try listening in other capacities as well. For listening part A, use the notes to anticipate what type of word you are listening for. For listening part B, activate prior knowledge. Try recalling previous experiences of these types of situations. And part C, pay attention to all parts of the question and options. But you should be listening for meaning, not vocabulary. And lastly, answer all questions, even if you need to guess. Okay, these can all be helpful for you. All right, to finish us off with some useful resources and tools and websites here. First thing is our sample test. I mentioned this a lot already. These are all on our website. There's different health-related podcasts that you could try listening to get used to various accents and to listen to real English pace, right? I mentioned before how it's important to practice with different types of accents. You should check out blogs on OET.com. So there's complete guides to part A, B, C, and tips on multiple choice questions using podcasts and more. And lastly, the OET listening course. So we have a course on our website that you can, I think it costs around $25. And it has a lot of extra resources to practice your listening. So if you find this is something you're struggling with, feel free to use that resource. Next week, as I mentioned, we had the reading workshop. So stay tuned for that next week. And I'm actually going to stop sharing now and turn it over to you to see if you have any questions about OET listening. Anything, any questions that you might have about what we covered today? Feel free to write your answer in the chat, or you can also take yourself off mute and share the answer that way if you would prefer, whatever works best for you. Okay, well, thank you again. If there are no additional questions, I hope to see you next week for the next session. Please do, keep practicing the different skills for OET. Maybe since we've done the listening workshop today, you can try to do some listening subtests and see if you can practice any of those skills that you talked about. Okay. Thank you again. Have a good rest of your day, and I hope to see you next week.